will tell you that it is peaceful now, but we do not know where and when the next raids will be. That is the concern, because people in the city have a rapid response network. If they see ICE, they go out and they protest. And so it's just a recipe for pandemonium that is completely unnecessary. Nothing was happening here. Los Angeles was peaceful.
A few moments later.
Many businesses have now been affected by or vandalized. Last night, there were 23 businesses that were looted. Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew, and you will be prosecuted.
For days, we were told by the Democrats that the riots happening in LA were just simply peaceful protests, and that, of course, law enforcement had it all well in hand. However, fast forward a little bit, and bam, the looting starts. And all of a sudden, Karen Bass decides to come out and declare a curfew, all right, because apparently they don't have it under control, and the mob is getting quite unruly. And then, of course, now we have the Marines being called in, and they have actually arrived in Los Angeles to help quell down this possible insurrection against federal agents. And that's exactly what we're going to see Pete Hegseth's completely own Representative McCollum on this exact same topic. So before we begin, don't forget to like and comment on this video so we can break through the algorithms. Here we go.
But then something else happened this weekend, and it needs to be addressed. And that is the president's premature and escalatory decision to deploy not only the National Guard troops to Los Angeles, but active duty Marines as well. Mr. Secretary, we're both from Minnesota. I was in the Twin Cities during the riots that followed the murder of George Floyd. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets for days. Governor Walz made the decision to call up the Minnesota National Guard. At no point did we need the citizens of Minnesota request that the Marines be deployed. Our state and local law enforcement, along with our National Guard, who have worked on crowd control, they were more than enough. They were more than capable of handling this situation. History has proven that law enforcement and the National Guard are more than capable of handling situations more volatile than what happened this weekend. We all see the continuous loops on TV, but this looks nothing like the George Floyd protests or the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles in 1992. Mr. Secretary, this is a deeply unfair position to put our Marines in. Their service should be honored. It should not be exploited. The President has issued an executive order and talked about deploying troops across the country. Los Angeles County has 17,000 law enforcement personnel, and the state of California has 24,000 National Guard troops. So that's why the Los Angeles Chief Police to say, and I quote, "The possible arrival of federal military forces in Los Angeles is absent a clear coordination, presents a significant logistical operational challenge for those of us who are charged with safeguarding the city," the end of his quote. As I mentioned before, in Minnesota, we train for those things together. So there's no need for the Marines to be deployed. So here are my budget questions, though. What is the current cost for what is taking place in California, and how is it going to affect this budget?
Well, Congresswoman, thank you for the question. You are right. We are both originally from Minnesota, which is why I recall 2020 quite well, when Governor Walz abandoned a police precinct and allowed it to be burned to the ground, and also allowed 5 days of chaos to occur inside the streets of Minneapolis. The police precinct, ma'am, was abandoned and burned to the ground. And because of that, the National Guard was eventually far too late mobilized. And President Trump recognizes a situation like that, improperly handled by a governor, like it was by Governor Walz, if it gets out of control, is a bad situation for the citizens of any location. So in Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations in any state and any jurisdiction in the country, especially after 21 million illegals have crossed our border under the previous administration. ICE ought to be able to do its job, whether it's Minneapolis or Los Angeles.
I have limited time. I asked a budget
and they
question.
Are being,
Could the Secretary please address the budget? Thank you.
You asked about the situation in Los Angeles, and we believe ICE agents should be allowed to be safe in doing their operations, and we have deployed National Guard and the Marines to protect them in the execution of their duties, because we ought to be able to enforce immigration law in this country, unlike what Governor Walz did in 2020. There are 17,000 LA PD, you mentioned that. There would be 18,000 if not for the defund movement that folks like Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have implemented.
If
the police chief said she was overwhelmed,
If the Secretary is not
so we
going to
helped.
ask the budgetary questions, I will yield back my time if the Secretary refuses to answer the budgetary questions I put before him. They're important. What training missions aren't happening? Where are you pulling the money from? And how are you planning this in the moving forward? These are budget questions that affect this committee and the decisions we're going to be making in a couple of hours. If you're not going to answer them, please let the chairman know, and I will take back my time and I will yield it back to the chairman.
Mr. Secretary, I want to just let us know what accounts you're pulling the money to fund.
Thankfully, unlike the previous administration, we've got a 13% increase in our defense budget, and we will have the capability to cover down on contingencies,
Mr.
which is
Chairman,
something the National Guard and the Marine plan for. So we have the funding to cover down on contingencies, especially ones as important as maintaining law and order in a major American city.
That is how you handle this situation, okay? You have Representative McCollum over here trying to gaslight, saying, I remember the George Floyd riots and how the National Guard worked hand in hand with Governor Tim Walz, and we were able to quell those riots and put everything back to rights. No, they burned police precincts to the ground. They were allowed to riot for days and cause billions of dollars in damage and destroy people's businesses and lives. But that's what Democrat mayors and governors did. They abandoned the citizens and allowed Antifa and BLM to express their rage and run roughshod over cities, okay? That's exactly what they were allowed to happen. But Donald Trump, who went through this once already, by the way, says, you know what? These Dem leaders would allow this to happen for an infinite amount of time. So I'm going to step in right now, nip it in the bud so that our federal agents are allowed to carry out the mandate that Donald Trump received, which of course is deporting the criminal illegal aliens, which is what this is really all about. You have a whole bunch of far left wackos and Mexican nationalists who are rioting in LA because they don't want to be deported. All right, that's exactly what's happening. But Representative McCollum, who sees she's being completely humiliated on this topic, has to pivot back to the budget, right? I asked you, Mr. Hegseth, about the budget, right? What's happening in LA? It's like, no, you brought up LA. You brought up the riots. You brought up the role of the Marines. And yes, you did ask how much it would cost. And Hegseth says, hey, don't worry about it. We've got extra funds given to us by President Donald Trump. So we can cover the cost of deploying the Marines to LA to make sure that the federal law enforcement agents are safe and able to actually conduct their operation. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how it's done. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me. Do you like t-shirts? Of course you do. And now you can support the channel by buying an Angry Teacher t-shirt designed by me, Angry Teacher. So if you like America, if you like freedom, if you like liberty, then go ahead and click the link in the description where all designs, of course, are 100% mother approved. So enjoy yourself and find something you like today.